Xenogears is one of the most philosophically ambitious games ever made, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since I finished the game for the first time in 2020. Its narrative isn't just steeped in religious imagery, it actively interrogates the structures and functions of institutionalized religion and other spiritual belief systems, and I can guarantee this will change the way you think about faith and the concept of God if you pay attention to the story. So yes, in today's video, we're talking about Xenogears and some of the more serious plots and themes within the game. Now, this is a video I've wanted to make for a long time, so I'm very excited to chat about all this today. But before we get to that, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe and let me know your thoughts on the video down below in the comment section. And yes, there are going to be some serious spoilers about the plot and the themes of the game, so please just be warned before we get into that. So let's get to the video. At the heart of Xenogears lies a direct critique of organized religion as a tool for socio-political control. The ethos, the primary religious institution of the game, initially presents itself as a benevolent organization dedicated to preserving historical knowledge and providing spiritual guidance. As the story unfolds, however, it is revealed that the ethos is in fact a puppet institution created by the Solaris government, one of the biggest twists of the entire game, and its true purpose is to pacify the masses and maintain a rigid social hierarchy through the illusion of divine authority. So functioning as both a religious and archaeological authority, the ethos shapes historical narratives and controls access to ancient technologies, effectively rewriting the truth to serve the elite. Very interesting, almost like what happens in real life. Its teachings are deliberately crafted to keep the lower classes subservient, ensuring stability for the powerful few, that 10% that people talk about every now and again in real life. Rather than offering spiritual truth, religion in Xenogears is exposed as a carefully constructed mechanism of domination, echoing real-world critiques of how religious institutions have been historically used to justify and reinforce systems of power and oppression. This portrayal directly challenges the perceived sanctity of organized religion, especially when it is used to maintain tradition and hierarchy at the expense of genuine human understanding and progress. One of the game's most profound theological commentaries draws from the Gnostic cosmology, which suggests that the material world is a flawed creation governed by a false god, and that salvation comes from the hidden knowledge that awakens from within. In Xenogears, this concept is embodied in the entity known as Deus, a biochemical weapon of godlike proportions that crash-landed on the planet thousands of years before the events of the game. The world's civilizations, religions, and myths were all subtly guided by Deus's long-term goal of resurrecting itself, a process that required the use of human life as raw material. In this context, Deus operates as a false god, mechanical and purely utilitarian, whose only concern is self-preservation and restoration. It manipulates the world through intermediaries like Solaris and the Gazelle Ministry, deceiving people into believing that service to it constitutes divine purpose. Now, the game's antagonists work to bring Deus's resurrection under the illusion that this will bring about salvation or ascension even. And in doing so, Xenogears confronts the monotheistic ideal of a benevolent, all-knowing creator, instead a deity that is morally indifferent, more machine than Messiah, more gears than God, in a way. It echoes Gnostic warnings against worshipping false or tyrannical creators, turning the traditional concept of God into something really suspect. Now, Xenogears is saturated with the idea that the death or the rejection of divine and institutional authority is necessary for humanity to achieve freedom and authenticity. Faye, the main character of Xenogears, undergoes a complex psychological journey as he confronts his fragmented self, his violent alter ego id, his constructed identity Faye, and his deeper role as something called the Contact. This confrontation with his self is paralleled by the unraveling of divine authority in the world around him, shown with lots of twists and turns throughout all the points in the story. Now let's quickly sidestep to discuss Faye. Faye is deeply tied to the game's themes of identity and trauma and human evolution. Faye is unknowingly the latest incarnation of a being known as the Contact, a person who shares a unique connection with the interdimensional entity Deus and with Ellie, his destined counterpart. Throughout the game, Faye struggles with severe dissociative identity disorder, a result of deep psychological trauma, obviously stemming from his past lives. These fragmented selves include the violent and destructive persona known as id, who embodies Faye's repressed rage and pain. Now, id is one of Faye's split personalities and acts as both a terrifying antagonist and a symbol of Faye's inner torment. He He represents the raw, uncontrolled force of Faye's suffering, shaped by a lifetime of loss, abandonment, and manipulation. The arc of Faye's character is ultimately about him coming to terms with all facets of himself, including id, and reclaiming the wholeness needed to fulfill his role as Contact. And as the Contact, Faye is meant to challenge the control of Deus and play a crucial part in humanity's path toward true freedom and self-determination, breaking the chains of fate, breaking the cycle of manipulation and repression that has defined human history in the game's world, thus giving rebirth, in a sense, to humanity as a whole. Now, the truth about Deus and the false religious structures is revealed throughout the story, and Faye is forced to realize that meaning and mortality cannot be dictated from above, but they must be constructed from within, embracing the death of a false god for the purpose of being born again within yourself. The narrative in Xenogears culminates with the idea that divinity does not reside in gods or institutions, but in human potential itself. The choice humanity faces is whether to remain dependent on an external god for guidance, or to forge its own future free from divine control. This existentialist message challenges traditional religion's reliance on a higher power for salvation, advocating instead for a worldview in which individuals create their own truth and purpose through consciousness, courage, and compassion. Now, if you guys are enjoying this more serious deep dive approach to the plot and the themes on religion in Xenogears, please like this video and subscribe. I would love to have your support and have you guys watching each and every week as I release a new video. This rejection of divine authority is reflected in Xenogears' reimagining of sacrificial salvation. The story subverts the Christian motif of God or Jesus sacrificing himself for the good of humanity. In the game, it is not a god who suffers for mankind, but a man, Krelian, who, disillusioned with both God and humanity after the death of Sophia, seeks to recreate a god through technological means. Now, Sophia dies a martyr in a desperate act of self-sacrifice to save her people, but her death only deepens Krelian's despair. He interprets her sacrifice not as a moment of spiritual triumph, for example, but as proof that no god is watching or worthy of worship. It kind of turns him really, really evil at that point. Krelian responds by attempting to force reconciliation between humanity and divinity, not through love or redemption, but by sacrificing humanity itself to birth a perfect God. This is a real subversion of Christian theology. Rather than salvation through divine compassion, we see a salvation project rooted in control and annihilation. Xenogears critiques the notion of redemptive suffering when it is weaponized to justify authoritarian means. Sacrifice in this context becomes a mask for despair and domination, again subverting and undermining some classic Christian themes. Now, throughout Xenogears, interestingly enough, there's a lot of religious and mythological imagery used to not affirm tradition, but to challenge and overturn it. Sophia serves as a female Christ-like figure, but her martyrdom leads not to peace or salvation, but to endless cycles of violence and myth-making. It becomes a tool used by others to rationalize their actions, showing how even the most spiritual teachings can be corrupted by those in power. The Zohar, another central image of Xenogears, appears as a divine energy source, but it's actually the prison of the wave existence, a higher dimensional being trapped in our world by accident. Worshipped unknowingly by generations, the Zohar symbolizes both divine power and captivity, drawing directly from Gnostic themes of the divine spark imprisoned in flesh. Now, what is the divine spark, you ask? It basically is the idea that a divinity or God is not confined to a specific place or entity, for example. It's present within all of us, almost like how Santa Claus may or may not be real, but is in each and every one of us. Kind of a loose comparison, but you get what I'm going for. So coupled with that, the game also has portrayals of some classic biblical things and archetypes, really blurring the line between sin, redemption, and destiny. Rather than reinforcing a clear moral dichotomy, Xenogears invites us to reevaluate inherited religious symbols and ask what they truly mean when stripped of dogma and context. Faith, sin, and salvation, none of these are presented as static or self-evident. They're questions, not answers, which is the most interesting thing to me about Xenogears. And this right here is what has really stuck with me all these years after finishing the game. Not completely undermining any faith I may or may not have, but just challenging me to approach the way that I think about faith and existence overall. Xenogears is a very deep and thought-provoking game, and again, it's one of the reasons why I've still continued to think about it all these years later, and really why I wanted to create a video like this for the longest time. Now, Faye's journey is as much psychological as it is spiritual. Drawing heavily from Carl Jung's theory of individuation, the game frames enlightenment not as a reward from an external deity, but as a result of confronting and integrating the fragmented parts of the self. So id represents Faye's repressed rage, trauma, and instinct, pretty much like this other self that he's repressed and sealed away because of all of these things. And to become whole, Faye must acknowledge id rather than suppress him and reconcile with all facets of his identity to become whole again, his true self. This inner unification becomes the foundation for his strength and his ability to resist the manipulations of false gods and institutions. In Xenogears, the true path to transcendence lies not in obedience or belief of any god or anything, but in self-awareness. This internal spiritual development contrasts sharply with religious traditions that emphasize submission to divine will or adherence to moral codes imposed from above. The message is clear here. Personal transformation and psychological wholeness are more sacred and more powerful than any external promise of salvation that may or may not be real. I suppose thinking that what's within yourself is more tangible than the what if of faith or the unknown of what's above, metaphorically. So ultimately, Xenogears isn't a critique. It really is a reconstruction of spiritual meaning divorced from institutionalized religion. It calls things into question like who defines God? What is God? Is salvation a gift or something earned through inner transformation? And can a religion based on control, fear, and sacrifice ever really lead to true enlightenment? Think of it like this. Don't sin or you'll go to hell. Don't do this or you get this. It's almost like when you're a parent. Don't jump up there because you might fall down. Don't do this because you might get hurt. It's a lot of what ifs and that's, action and consequence. By weaving together some of the most interesting and divisive topics out there, such as theology, psychology, and interestingly enough, science fiction, Xenogears offers a vision of spirituality rooted in self-awareness, liberation from imposed narratives, and the courage to face a godless universe with open eyes. Xenogears isn't necessarily atheistic, it's actually post-theistic. In this view, the idea of God belongs to an earlier stage of human development, and the usual debate between disbelief and belief no longer applies. Instead, the game points towards transcendence not by replacing God, but by seeking growth after God. Meaning isn't handed down from above, but discovered through courage and self-reflection and that human connection. At that point in humanity, what's pitched by Xenogears is God is a past tense thing, and meaning is created from within. It's very, very interesting. Do you agree with this? Has this challenged the way that you see faith and God? I don't know. It's done a lot for me, and it's been a wonderful exercise in food for thought and thinking about all these things that are really, I guess, big brain topics. But I love this game because it makes you think, and not many games do that. So thank you so much for watching today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment your thoughts. This is a very serious, topical video. So there's going to be lots of discussions in the comments, and I would love to know what you guys think, and I would love to hear from you. So otherwise, we'll see you again on another video next week. Bye-bye.